When I first met Linda Avey, my co-founder, we both had this amazing frustration. We both had this realization that the consumer is really underutilized in healthcare. So if I'm an academic, I'm a physician, I own my data, I go to my physician, I ask him questions. If I'm the pharma company, I'm trying to develop the drugs, but that the consumer really wasn't that well utilized. And we wanted to create a platform for individuals to have a voice. Because we didn't think that we could actually make change happen from within the system, we said, we need to actually create something that's totally outside of the system that's going to give all of us power to make a difference. And that power to make a difference is the ability to say, I want my genome, and I want to be able to network with other people about their genomes or about specific diseases. That's 23andMe. So I have my first case study. This is my poor unfortunate roommate from college, Monica. Monica, who worked in film, she knew nothing about biology. I made her spit when we started the company. She was like, I really could care less about my DNA. But Monica had some questions. She knows obviously both her parents. She knows some about her background, but she didn't know a lot. But if you look at her, like, what is she? Is she Jewish, African American, Hispanic, Native American? Can you tell? Is she at risk for macular degeneration? Sickle cell? Is Plavix going to work in her? Can she drink 3 cups of coffee a day? All kinds of questions about her health. So just as a little background, 23andMe has a service where we can actually tell you some information about your ancestry. Now this is sort of going to be a good percentage of the people in this room. This is sort of the typical European background, so 100% European. This is one of the offspring of 23andMe. One parent is Asian and one parent is European. So you can see it's sort of half and half. Now this is Monica. So Monica is quite colorful. And it was this, I showed this slide once, and people did come up after the talk and say, is she single? The question here is how do you actually, if she went to the doctor's office, what would you say? Like, what would she fill out on the form? If she was wanted to be tested for BRCA, and they asked, are you of Jewish descent, they probably would have no idea. So if I look at that specifically at BRCA1, BRCA2, well, what is that? It's sort of part on the European part on the Asian part on the African part. Like, I don't know, it's mostly found in the Ashkenazi population, but so what is it? So it really emphasized the point to us that you can't necessarily tell that much just by looking at someone. So Monica also became an interesting story because, again, as I mentioned, she wasn't that interested in her DNA until she saw the ancestry and was like, wow, that was pretty cool. And then, unfortunately, after a long flight back from London, she had a pain in her leg. And lo and behold, it turned out she had a blood clot. And Monica, having her DNA, was like, wow, I actually have my warfarin report. So again, lo and behold, Monica has increased warfarin sensitivity. So she may require a lower dose. So she actually took that to the doctor and said, warfarin's typically a drug that's life savings, but it's difficult to dose. You get too much of it, you can bleed to death. You get too little of it, it doesn't successfully break up the clot. So this was suddenly really useful information for Monica. But the way the current healthcare system works, you're never going to get that information ahead of time. Again, this goes back to the mission of the company. For me, it was worth it for me. If I paid $400, I want that information ahead of time. But for the insurance companies, it says, well, it's easier just to try dosing you. Give you a little bit too much, you bleed, we'll adjust it. I don't really feel like bleeding, or I don't feel like, not successfully having my blood clot dismantled. So it was really helpful information for her. This is sort of a snapshot of the offering that we're having now. We have 4 drug responses, pharmacogenetic reports now: warfarin, abacavir, Plavix, and 5-FU. So Plavix is actually a really interesting example because it's one of the world's best-selling drugs, if not the world's best-selling drug now. And in 30% of patients, it doesn't work. So Plavix is used for acute coronary syndrome and other things. If you get a stent, you might get Plavix afterwards. But wouldn't that suck if you start taking it and it's not really working, and then you have another acute coronary syndrome? So why don't we test ahead of time? So again, what the response that I usually get from the current system is, well, it's cheaper just to see if you're not responding, then we just switch your therapy. So it becomes a question, like, I can't fault the system because that's just the way the system works. But as an individual, I want that opportunity now to actually take more control over my health. And that's fundamentally what we think, is that there should be more and more of these opportunities. And that, again, is the mission of the company. have that opportunity to take charge. One of the areas that probably gets more of the controversy is the risk prediction. If I could tell you that you're at higher risk for breast cancer or prostate cancer, what would you do? And granted, it's a great debate. Some people want to know, and some people don't want to know. You don't want to know, you don't have to know. But we're never going to get to that era of preventative care if I can't find out ahead of time what am I actually at risk for. So I can look at family history. There's a lot of people who don't know their family history. My family came over from Eastern Europe. I only know 1 or 2 generations back. I have no idea what people died of, and people didn't talk about their diseases in the past. So I want to know, what am I at increased risk for? And this was actually a very personal example for us, where my husband's family has a lot of Parkinson's in it. And I wanted to know, is he at increased risk? So I knew that there was actually a marker out there that's commonly found in Ashkenazi Jewish populations, and I wanted him to get him tested. I couldn't get anyone to test him for it. They all said it's so unlikely that he has it, and even if he had it, what would you do? You wouldn't do anything. Sort of all the typical arguments. So the great thing about having your company is you can sort of encourage people to do something. So our science team conveniently put this on our chip, the ability to test for this variation for Parkinson's. And lo and behold, it turns out my husband's family has it. And my husband, you can see here, average about 1.6 people out of 100 are likely for developing Parkinson's. Wow, he's over 50%. My God, we need to do something. And so this has actually been a huge kick in the butt. I've always told him, hey, you're getting a little fat. But now he's suddenly quite fit. He works out every day. He rides his bike. He actually watches what he eats. He's really worried about it. And I think a lot of it came from just this. We're really motivated to say, if he's at increased risk for Parkinson and over 50% chance, well, my God, there's 40 of those people who are not going to get Parkinson's. What is it that we can do that's going to enable him to prevent getting Parkinson's? And that also becomes one of the main missions for 23andMe. So this gets into the Research 2.0 concept, where what we're trying to do is you get access to your genetic information, and then you have the ability to fill out a survey. And 23andMe has a whole science team that's now trying to say, we get all your genetics, we get all the results from your survey information, now we're going to start trying to understand, what does this genetic information mean? Because we know some of what genetic information means, but we've just barely scratched the surface. I feel like it's aggressive even saying that we scratched the surface, because we know so little of this information. So we have a lot more to find. And for instance, in my husband's example, if I know he's at high risk, I really want to know, what is it that we can do that's going to prevent it? And I feel confident that there's going to be some things out there. It might be that there's some drug therapy that comes along. It might be that there's certain kind of vitamins. It might be a really vigorous kind of exercise. There's something out there that we can discover that's going to be able to help him prevent it. So 23andMe is really focused on the research. We've been really secretive about how big our database size actually is, but it's at that point where we're actually starting to publish and we're making discoveries. So we're happy to say that the database now is over 30,000 genomes of, I should say, active genomes of people who are actually participating on the site. And over 70% of our users are filling out at least one survey. So you can imagine we have a tremendous amount of data that's coming out. Our science team is just in heaven. If any of you want to research data, just let me know. So what we're also really proud of, in the last 2 years, we've successfully been able to create one of the world's largest databases of genotype-phenotype information. So I asked our science team to try to tell me which databases were larger, and they didn't want to be too arrogant of saying, oh, we're the largest already. I mean, there's Decode and there's some of the other groups that have it, but we have an amazing asset here. And what we're hoping to do is to figure out, again, from the personal mission of all of us, we want better healthcare and we want it now. And I want certain things, like if there's a drug response, if I can find out if I'm not going to respond to a drug, I want to know that now. So we're going to work with all the different disease advocacy groups and other things, try to figure out how do we empower the individuals to come and, again, try to make healthcare better for all of us. So this is an example of some of the surveys we have. We have some fun things. I'll just do a quick survey. How many people actually smell the asparagus when they eat it in their pee? And how many people have no idea what I'm talking about? Or are you too embarrassed? Oh. It's always very interesting. We had an example once with a camera crew where they just stared at us like, what are you talking about? It's always fun when people don't know. So we have over 20 surveys now, asking from all kinds of trivial things like, the asparagus question to, when you clasp your hands, which thumb is on top, to the more serious, where we have actually, 10, healthcare traits about you, what kind of over-the-counter medications. So things like Benadryl. How many of you actually get hyper when you take Benadryl? Yeah, you just want to know that probably if you have your children and they accidentally take it. So all kinds of research topics that we're continuing to pursue, and this has been growing pretty rapidly. I'm also happy to announce this was an abstract that just came out at the American Society of Human Genetics last week. We have publications, I should say, pending, but you can see that this method is yielding results, where we are actually finding novel associations. In fact, we have results on 22 common traits that are going to be in this publication. And if you want to look at the ASHG website, you can probably find it. So we also have 2 major research initiatives underway, one with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, where we were enrolled over 3,000 Parkinson's patients within a month. From start to finish, we started that project in January. December of this year at the Faster Cures Conference, we are going to be announcing data from that. So anyone who knows things about clinical trials will realize this is a phenomenal timeline, how quickly we've been able to enroll people, study them, and actually have some kind of data. Healthy aging is a project that we just did with the Senior Games. The Senior Games were in Palo Alto this year, and we thought it was a phenomenal cohort. People between really over 55 and 80 participating in a multitude of athletic events. We offered free genotyping to them. We have over 5,000 people now filling out surveys. And for us, this is phenomenal. It's a healthy older cohort. So again, that's a population that is difficult to usually find as part of studies. We just really love this graph. This is actually a visual representation of our database, a subset of our database, and how people are sharing. So one of the unique things about 23andMe, again, is that we want individuals to be able to communicate with each other. So we find there's a very active number of active dialogues on Parkinson's and all the other diseases, and individuals find and they connect to each other, and then they start to share. And you can see this guy is obviously a super sharer. He has a lot of friends, and all the other little blue dots are the nodes. But you can see that sharing is incredibly popular on the site. So one of the other things that has come out of having a large database now is that people started to realize that they could start to find lost family members. We'd created a product where you could compare yourself to your siblings or your distant cousins and actually see where you share DNA in common. And then all of a sudden, all these people started saying, I have random pieces of DNA in common with my friend down the street. So we actually did a little experimenting, and we're also happy to announce that we are introducing a new feature that's going to launch in the next couple weeks called Relative Finder. The majority of ancestry products test really either the maternal lineage or the paternal lineage. So if you see on this tree, that's really just one branch of the whole tree. The mitochondrial DNA is your mother's mother's mother. Y chromosome is father's father's father. So it's a limit. What we can do now is we can fill out the whole tree. And so all those cousins that you may or may not know, we can actually now start to identify. This is a quote that actually just popped up. We just launched this in beta for the last couple weeks. But as you can see, people are finding lost relatives. And it's phenomenal. For populations who have had to move over the last century and don't have, for instance, my grandmother had 8 siblings, and we don't know. We know a couple of them, but we don't know where the most of the other siblings, their descendants, went. So now suddenly, you're actually starting to be able to connect these people. So this is sort of an example of what my account looks like. You can see there I have my parent and child. You can see siblings, uncles, nephews. So it's actually identifying. I've obviously made a number of my family members spit. But look, I have a second cousin that I'm not connected with. I have a feeling I think I know who it is, but it's pretty interesting. And then look at all my third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins. But I have almost over 900 cousins in this database. So granted, a lot of them are pretty distant, but I have a lot of near-term or close relatives between first, second, third, fourth cousins. So it's become phenomenally interesting to start to look at this. Thank you.